Okay, so if you follow the upcoming tutorial, then this is what you'll get. The T-1000 kit with the T-1000, and I've just put it in a pose with a few of the accessories, but there's also quite a bunch of hands and other stuff you can put in there, including the weapons and everything. So it's the complete kit. And then all you have to do is add another slim Hot Toys body and a neck peg that I will be putting a link in the description below. And you will have a double set because there's enough clothes to go around. Now, for those of you who don't want to do this, this very kit double set is available with the extra body, extra peg, and even another accessory that comes from the Sarah Connor kit, which you can use to pose this guy. I will be putting that on eBay at $1 with no reserve, and you guys can just decide what it's worth. That answers the question of if this is available, yes, and if the eBay auction is gone, then you're too late. I do not take commissions anymore, so this is your only chance, because it took me more than a year to get down to finally have time for this one. It's crazy busy with my family, my work, and the diorama business. So have fun with this tutorial, and I look forward to your responses in the comments below. So I've been wanting to do this tutorial for a long time. This is the very popular T-1000 kit by Hot Toys. It's quite hard to get. And it took me a while to find it on eBay, but I found it, and unfortunately, due to all the diorama business work, I didn't have time to do this earlier. But I've done a few of these, and I've had so many requests to show how I did this. So when you have found your T-1000, the first thing I suggest you do is buy an extra slim Hot Toys body, which I did because the kit has plenty of parts for 2 figures, and it would be a shame to give up this very cool T-1000 and to give up this very cool T-1000 body with the magnets built in for the liquid metal bullet hole effects. So what I suggest you do to get started on this is to get the gear for the motorcycle cop, which is an extra in this kit. So it has almost everything you need as an extra. You have the pants and the jacket, you have the belt, you have the helmet and the glasses. Please be warned, these glasses are extremely fragile. I had to buy an extra pair more than once on eBay, so be very careful with them. Now, the only thing you will need from the regular T-1000 is the head, so that's why I said you can almost have your cake and eat it too, have 2 figures, because you will have to display your T-1000 with the split head option if you want to have 2 figures, which I suggest we go for. So let's get both figures dressed and ready. Okay, so the first step in this customizing process is also for many people the most scary. In order to do what we want to do, we have to give up the sword hand, because that will function as the broken off hand we see in the scene with the liquid nitrogen. I use my trusty wireless Dremel for this. You can also use different tools, especially for the cutting. You can use a small saw or whatever. The Dremel is, however, very handy because we want to do the broken faceted finish on the top, like a piece of ice that's broken, and the Dremel is very handy for that. The bits I use are the speed discs the Easy Speed Disc cutter and the this cutting bit. So the first thing to do is we want to make this as short as possible, or it will just look like his arm is too long. But we cannot go too far, because then we will lose and just cut off this bit here that locks into the peg that locks into the arm. So I'm getting a slide, and you can just probably copy my measurements, because I'm assuming it's going to be quite universal for those who don't have this caliper. I'm going to slide it in and push it down to know I have the exact right measurement. So the depth I am getting is about 17 millimeters. So on the outside, I will now measure a little bit more, 18, and just use this to indicate where I need to cut. Let me get you close to that. And then I just fire up the Dremel. Okay, so we managed to save this peg that goes into the wrist. Now, if you want to be totally safe, you can do what I did at first and cut closer to where the actual sword shape starts. That'll save you from having to putty this thing back in, but to my eye, then the lower part of his arm just looked a little bit too long, so a little bit unnatural. I've had no complaints from customers, but for this one, I'm going to make this shorter. We're going to have to use the plastic putty anyway to get the shapes and everything filled up and get the shapes the way we want. So this is why we're starting with this part, so that while we are working on the rest, this can dry. So I use the plastic putty by Vallejo, or Vallejo. So it's Vallejo. As you might know, if you're a frequent guest on my channel, I'm very big fan of their stuff. I keep coming back to their paints, their metallic chrome paints and stuff like this putty. Alright, so a quick heads up, this is also covered in the manual, but to put on the helmet, please don't loosen these straps. Just take apart and put the head in like that. Don't forget to get the sunglasses on first, like that. And then click on the helmet. Like so. Just be careful, this stuff is very fragile. No excessive force is needed, so don't use any. If you have to press very hard, you're not doing it right. So we're going to put this aside for now and work on the body some more. Alright, so with our motorcycle cop dressed up, I'm putting the head aside. I've ordered the adapter that is required for the earlier head sculpts to go on a more recent body. I'll put up a picture, and if I can find it, a link in the video. But we don't need that now because we're still working on the arm. Now I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. Only thing I did was cut off the cuff for the jacket, and I think I might cut off even more because, like I said, we don't want the arm too long because that looks weird. And this is supposed to hide the transition from fabric to this molded plastic, and more material means more unnatural bunching, so we don't want that. So really spend time here getting your transition to look as natural as possible, so less folds is better, hence cutting off the material, because more material means more folds. So push it down as far as it'll go, and then smooth it out as much as you can. And as you can see, that looks pretty good already. And the rest will be done in post, as they say, or in the airbrushing stages for us. But first we need to fill up this extra space here and create some facets that suggest it broke off. So you can really benefit from trying to go back and forth as much as you can until you get the configuration with the least amount of creasing. Also, being strategic about where you place the creases, where they won't catch the eye as much. So on the inside, close to his chest, that sort of area. Now that looks pretty good. So what I like to do is get some super glue gel to surround the joint right there. And then press it down. The super glue stuff is great because even though it might turn white, that's no problem in this case because everything will turn white and blue eventually due to the airbrushing we're going to do for the icing effect. But it allows us to sculpt the transition, as you can see, hiding it even more. Like that. And we also might use a little bit of the plastic putty to sculpt the transition even more. So once we get in there with the airbrush, after all the sculpting is done, it's going to look seamless. See how it disappears into the creases, which again will work in our favor once we finish the airbrushing. Now you don't want a completely crease-free look because it is fabric that is frozen. So frozen fabric should have some creases. It's just that we want to make our own decision about where and how that appears. Now notice how I'm already positioning the arm in the position that it's going to have when we're done. So he's going to look at it. So we need to curl up the arm like that. Yep, I think that'll be very good. Now we also need to fill up the hole like this. Now we're going to be doing the final shaping when this all is set and dried, but it doesn't hurt to start now while you can. So we're going to be building this up in several portions, several instances, because we don't want to make a too big a layer of the putty, because then the insides will never completely dry. So we'll leave it here and come back tomorrow. Alright, so we've had time, or the putty had time to dry. As you can see, I tried to make the surface irregular to start with. Also, the transition has now dried. So now, before we airbrush this into a dark blue color, so it's ready for the final frozen type snow effect and ice effect, we need to shape this like it is a broken piece of metal, then airbrush it, and then add the metal effect with one of my secret components. The well, that's not so secret anymore. Talked about it quite a bit. The bare metal foil is what we're going to use. So I use a Dremel, maybe a knife, to get this shape. So the effect I'm going for is angular and just broken off. So this is part of the artistic part of the process, where you just have to do what looks good to you. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, It's going to look even better once we get the bare metal on there. So now let's smooth it out with a knife. Make sure the lines and edges are cleaned a bit. Let me see if I can get a close-up for you guys to see what I did. It's different every time. I haven't done it quite a lot, but it is different every time I do it. So now once this is painted and the bare metal is glued on top of this, it'll look awesome, trust me. So on to the airbrush. Alright, so time to get out the old airbrush. I'm using the 62011 Malaysia Premium Dark Blue, but our figure is nearly black blue. Now the good news is we won't have to get very close, because the final color will be the white and light blue you see in the movie. So really, just approaching it would be good. So I've put a lot of dark blue in my airbrush, and you only need a few drops of black, because it's a very powerful color, to get the very dark blue that we're looking for. This is the dark blue you're looking for. Alright, corny Jedi joke, who cares? So, let's get a sheet of white paper, test it on. Let's see. First comes the regular dark blue, and then the black will come through. Stir it a little bit more. I'm using a gravity feed airbrush, which I suggest for almost everyone. A little bit more black. So, like I said, it's a very powerful color, and I'd rather you have too little than too much in there, and build it slowly. So let's get a new sheet of paper, see how we're doing now. Oh, too much pressure. Yeah, that's going to work. I don't know if you can tell, but that's going to work fine. So, slowly. So lots of air, very little paint. Turn it. Because we'll also need the surface of the cut-off sword arm to turn dark blue instead of the silver that it is. See if I can get you in close here. Focus. Yeah, so here we go. As soon as it becomes a little bit shiny, that's when you stop. You don't want any running in the paint. And we don't need to do the top, because we're going to be using the bare metal foil for that to get the maximum metal effect. So once that's dry, which should be pretty quickly, you won't be able to tell where the fabric ends and the actual plastic takes over because, well, the basic molding they've done is very good. So especially once we're completely done with the snow or icing and weathering, this should look perfect. Alright, so if you're serious about doing this and any other type of custom work, by the way, I can really suggest getting some bare metal foil. This is actual metal that is incredibly flexible and that can conform to many shapes. So for me it's a must-have. I've used it on Iron Man figures and well, obviously on this one as well. So now that this is dried up nicely and in exactly the right color, I might add, I'm very happy with how the transition looks. It's going to look even better once we're done with the icing effect and the weathering, and then the final layer of a matte lacquer, which is going to make the look perfect. So we're going to add the chrome bare metal to the stump of the hand, and as you can see, that is some excellent stuff. Very reflective, very realistic. So just cut off a square, leave a bit to spare, and we'll be adding that. Now the tools you will need are glue, and if you've seen my work you might be familiar with this. I'm very much of a fan of this stuff because it's a polymer based glue, and I suggest you look for something similar in your on your home planet, because this has a couple of properties, and I've touched on this on another video, but if you missed that, I've learned that picking the right glue for the right application is incredibly important. People love super glue. It's nice stuff, but it doesn't have a lot of shear strength, it doesn't have filling capabilities, and it's very brittle. And for this we need filling capability, and we need something that will remain flexible and will adhere to all the surfaces. This adheres to metal as well as plastic, so I'm a big fan of that. So let's get that on. But first I see I forgot my Q-tips, and those are very important for this step. I'll go in there with the glue. Don't overdo it. This is more than enough for now, because too much glue will never really properly dry. And so I put a bit too much here, then it means I just won't put some glue elsewhere. Okay, a little bit more. Now, don't use Q-tips to spread out the glue if you use something like a super glue, because that will really limit the strength. So you will find that the bare metal also has an adhesive layer, which in most cases is enough to do the job, especially if you put a layer of sealant lacquer on top of that. But in this case I have found that we want to use some extra to help it set. Now we're just going to apply this, and you'll be surprised at how incredibly flexible this stuff is. You also want to be careful with the sharp edges that we've created, the sharp edges that really help sell the broken piece of ice it is supposed to represent, but since this foil is very thin, it might cut through. So gently apply pressure until it looks the way we want it, and then we'll leave it to dry, and only when the glue has fully set will we be trimming off any excess. But I'm guessing you can already see the potential of a look like this, and that's already looking the part quite well. Let this dry and we'll be back for the trimming and the icing. So with the glue firmly set, I am going to use a knife to cut off the excess foil. So part of this is just looking at the lines you've created for yourself. So here I'm just following the line of the Dremel, but you can get a bit creative with that, and just whatever looks natural. I try to go for clean lines. So as you can see, nothing beats the look of actual metal to sell the look of a metal foil. So to me, it already looks very much like that broken off piece of arm in the movie. So I'll just go around and make the lines the way I like them, and then we can go to the next step, the next phase. Okay, I don't know, I lost count. So the neck peg adapters came in from eBay, and let's see if that does the trick. This one goes here. All right, and then that should plug in here. Nice. Okay, so that works. So I'll definitely be providing a link to that in the eBay auction if you want to follow my plan and get the extra body, so that you can use this kit to make it a double pack, essentially, because there's enough parts for two if you have the extra body and the neck adapter. So I'll be doing a little bit of futzing, and then attaching a hand would be one of the things here. And then what we want to do is get it into the exact pose and see how that looks, if that is the way we want it, because yeah, you don't want to have to mess with it when you're done with the weathering and the snow and the icing effects and the flat coat of matte lacquer. So to me this looks pretty good. The thing to look out for is here, if you don't have the shoulder right, there's an unnatural concave area. So that looks okay now. I usually just get a relaxed hand to hold by his side. As you can see, this is still a bit shiny, but again, that will be fixed as soon as we get the icing effect, the white and light sea blue, sea blue details, and then the flat lacquer coating to seal everything. So even though it looks pretty good now, it will be better later. Okay, exciting stuff, almost there. So this time we move to my little spray area, where we will start with the icing effects using Model Mate's snow spray. This Model Mate stuff is nice because, unlike regular snow stuff, this is meant for actual modeling, and so it's semi-permanent. And after I am finished going over it with the airbrush for color and the matte lacquer, it's going to be permanent. So I used to start with the airbrushing, but I found then it might get too heavy. So now I start with the snow spray, and you want to be very careful and just have a light touch, because easy does it, and a little goes a long way with this. I'm barely touching the button, barely holding it down. I do the helmet last, so I have something to hold on to while I turn this. Now I didn't tape off the metal part because I want some of the effects to go over the edge, and I'll clean off anything that I don't like later with some airbrush cleaner. Now, there are always a few larger flakes. I remove them while I still can because they mess with the look. Okay, almost there. Once you're done, put it upside down and spray it clean so you can use it again. I'm going to leave it like this for the icing effect and move on to the airbrush. Alright, so for the final phase of the airbrushing, the most important part is the primer, the premium white primer from Vallejo, which is the 63.061. That adheres very well, and the white is the effect we're going to be needing most. For some accents, I use the Azure Blue, that's 70.902. I can mix that with a little bit of the white primer to get a little bit of the blue hue you see in the movie. I know that's a light filter, but it's still nice to use. And then I finish it off with the matte varnish, so that is the 70.520. Now this is all very much down to personal taste. The white helps sell the look, and I also use it to accent certain areas. Again, easy does it. I like enhancing the creases in the pants and the boots. the toes of the boots. I really don't do much with the face. If you've done your job properly with the snow and the matte lacquer, that will take care of most of that. Now when there's barely any white left, I go in with a few drops of the azure blue, mix that, and keep going. With the azure blue you want to be extra careful. Okay, now let's move on to the matte varnish. That always lightens up everything a little bit more, like very thin down white. So then if I'm not happy, I can always go back and add a little bit more. I grab him by the black front part of the helmet. That is the safest area. The cap of the helmet, that would be right. Stop when you see a gleaming wetness. Alright, so it's looking good, but before we let the varnish settle and dry, we're getting the airbrush cleaner, again Vallejo 71199, and cleaning off the metal from the varnish, the snow effect, the white paint. And now let it settle.